Hey folks, what follows is what I believe is never before seen footage. I don't know that anyone has aired this yet, whether the Dutch film crew has aired anything like this or CBS News, who also recorded live video. But this was recorded on my phone by someone who was recording for me, and I appreciate that. This is me at Opitplas in May of this year, just before the first refugees arrived in America. This is the same day that I clandestinely secretly met with Thea van Straten in Pretoria East about being a refugee. So BBC lied to the world, falsely claiming they had the first interview with the South African refugee. That's utter bullshit, total nonsense, fictitious, fabricated by a state-run propaganda outlet. The first interview ever conducted with a South African refugee was in South Africa, in Pretoria East, when I interviewed Thea. Anyway, this is what I said about the refugee program briefly before I went to that interview with her. And what I've said has been wildly misrepresented. Therefore, you get to see unedited footage here. Thanks, folks. Cheers. All right, folks, please, if you could take your seats, we'll get started again. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here. There's been a request for me to start shifting to the refugee questions. All right, let's be very clear about, God bless it. Let's be very clear about one thing. Again, I'm not an official of the U.S. government. I don't work for the U.S. government. I did get my retirement check from there, thankfully, which is nice that I get something. I'm not encouraging anyone to go to the United States. That's not my role. Is that these other mics or what? Yeah, so I'm not encouraging. Yeah. Close. Well, I've got mics everywhere on me. Oh, the speaker. All right, I'll stand. Yes. It's not working, guys. You going back here now? All right, you've just taken away 50% of my mobility. I mean, I engage with my audience by walking amongst it. I'm like Phil Donahue, and I have the white hair like he does too. All right, so that's probably lost on most people that aren't from North America, Phil Donahue. All right, so okay, so again, I don't represent the U.S. government. I think everybody knows that, but I want to be clear about that because, you know, when this refugee thing cropped up, suddenly people are like, hey, he's a refugee guy. I'm not the refugee guy. I'm just an honest person who tries to do what's right, moral, and just each and every day for everybody that I can. That's my role. That's my goal. So, again, not the refugee guy. However, I can read the law. I do have experience. I was a federal law enforcement official as well, counterintelligence agent, and I have decades experience in the government. And unlike a lot of people, I don't rush to judgment on things that I see. So when I read executive orders, I actually read them thoroughly, and I look at what the points are. Okay, so let's talk about the refugee program. Again, not asking anyone to leave this country. I'm heartbroken that anybody would want to leave South Africa. It's such an amazing, beautiful country with incredible topography, a very strange and fascinating history for all the peoples, whether it's Zulu or Enda or Afrikaners, Boers, whatever you call yourself. This is an amazing country with such great potential that sadly, in my view, much of it going to waste because of the way the policies are set up. And maybe they're well-intentioned. I'm not going to dispute that, but the outcomes are what matter, and the outcomes are atrocious. And there's no need for it. This country, make me dictator for a day, and you'd all be happy. Things have changed. No, seriously. So I'm not here to encourage you. And again, I will answer one question before it comes up. The Federal Emergency Management Agency does not handle refugees. There are no FEMA tents. This is also not asylum. Asylum is a legal status. You can only apply for asylum with the United States if you were legally in the United States. And I give the example of someone like Mikhail Baryshnikov, Bolshoi Ballet, comes to America, doesn't like communism. Hey, I want to be an asylum seeker. Well, he's there legally, and he's fleeing from his unjust government. He can apply. But asylum seekers by law are not allowed to work in America. So in many respects, they're a drain on our economy. Well, we kind of violated that law last 4 years, but hopefully that's sorted out now. Refugee status is something very different. Normally, refugees are people who flee a country under the international accepted definition of refugee and go to another country for safety. People who flee from Darfur, they go to Chad, they typically register with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and become registered refugees. Oftentimes, the conflict continues and they can't go home, so they seek resettlement elsewhere. They get in a queue. People also go from Somalia to Kenya. The world's largest refugee camp with 650,000 people living in it is in Kenya, full of Somalis. Can you imagine how horrible that is for those people living there 30 years in tents and informal villages as refugees with little hope? There are 7.6 million African refugees who would like to relocate somewhere. Canada, US, Germany, the Netherlands, somewhere safe. President Trump has issued an executive order under his authority on the Immigration Nationality Act, of 1980, which allows Congress, the Secretary of State, or the President to designate a group of people as a special group of people, priority to, who are persecuted or in fear for their lives. And I'll often give the example here of if you're homosexual and you live in Syria, do you think that's probably a very good place for homosexuals to live, given the cultural attitudes toward homosexuality? It's not. So if a person who's gay in Syria wants to get refugee status in country, if we allow that, we don't allow it, we say, well, prove you've been persecuted. Prove you've been a victim of persecution. Oh, they dropped you off a roof. I guess you were right. That's a little bit late. So that's why our law allows our authorities to designate a group of people before things happen to them, if necessary. So I don't know how the executive order is going to play out or how the program is going to play out, because I don't work in the government and I'm not making these plans. But all things being equal, the way the executive order is written, in theory, you should have to prove that you are a victim of persecution or that you have a genuine fear of persecution, which is the normal standard for getting refugee status. Because you'll be put in priority 2 based on the executive order, you simply have to prove that you're an Afrikaner, whatever the heck that is. Now, you've heard me on my program say my definition of Afrikaner is probably far broader than many people here. To me, an Afrikaner is someone who speaks Afrikaans, is typically Dutch Calvinist, Christian of some sort, and is culturally aligned to the Afrikaans community. And I know a lot of colored folks that meet that definition, and are also farmers. I also know some Indians who fit that definition, and even a few Black South Africans who culturally fit that. You may have heard of the singer Referenza. He's culturally Afrikaans. So my definition isn't what matters. It's not what your definition is. It's not what the media's definition matters. The only definition that matters is what the U.S. government decides. Also, this is not a program for farmers, according to the executive order. I challenge you to find one place in the executive order where farmers is mentioned. You won't. It doesn't exist. I also challenge you to find one place in the executive order where it says white people. It doesn't. It says Afrikaners suffering unjust racial discrimination. Now, most people would assume that that's white folks. Fair assumption. But it doesn't mean it necessarily is. So we'll see what happens. Now, what's happened, before I take questions, in the interregnum since February 7th is a lot of misinformation and a lot of supposition. 1,000 people are going. This people are going. Only farmers are going. I can't go because I'm crippled. I can't do this. People are making a lot of assumptions not based on fact, particularly in the media and politicians. And I caution you about that. There is, if you've been watching my program, what I'm describing from sources that contacted me, and I'm very circumspect about reporting things until I can confirm things at multiple levels, because there's a lot of misinformation. Some of it is actually disinformation intended to dissuade people from taking advantage of the program. Again, I'm not asking you to leave, and none of you are coming on my lawn. I have crew serve weapons, and I'll keep you out. My yard's not that big. All right, so, but I'm also not here to dissuade you. I cannot speak for the people who've suffered some of the horrific things. Folks, the things that I've heard, not just from white South Africans, but from other South Africans, are blood-curdling over the years. And every time I come back to South Africa over the last 30 years, it gets progressively worse. Women who've been gang raped because of their skin color. A farmer whose daughter and mother were murdered on the first farm attack, got counseling, and then a year later, his wife was killed on the farm. Brendan Horner. Edward Neumeister. The list goes on and on. The lies spread about this. It's horrific. People being denied jobs, tenders, being forced to sell their companies for a song, losing their rights because of corruption and a system that's become really twisted and sick. It's difficult to hear these stories, but I'm a big boy, and at least I think I am. I'm still trying to grow up. But it really is sad, and I understand. Anybody that rubbishes a person that wants to take up the refugee status offer is rude and disrespectful. They cannot sit in your shoes and know what you've gone through. And by the same token, if you rubbish someone who doesn't want to take up the refugee status, you're just as wrong. Whether 3,000, 300, or 300,000 or 2.8 million Afrikaners leave the United States on this refugee program when it comes into effect after what I call this proof of concept that they're doing now, there will always be Afrikaners in South Africa. There will always be Boers in this country. This is your land. Excuse me, this is who you are. It won't change. But I will tell you this, and I've never sugarcoated this. America is normally a land of assimilation. That doesn't mean you abandon everything. We got kindergarten from the Germans. We got that. We got cotillion from the Spanish. We got that. We got the Amish who make fantastic furniture and sell wonderful farm products and still speak German, by the way, and the Mennonites. But assimilation is the norm in America until recently, and that's become a bit of a problem we're dealing with now. But assimilation is the norm. If you go to America and you hope or expect that your grandchildren will be Afrikaners, I'm sorry to disappoint you, they won't be Afrikaners. They'll be Americans, and the odds are they won't speak Afrikaans. That's the reality. What's that beeping? Have I got dead battery here? Anyway, so just to be upfront about that. That doesn't mean you should go or shouldn't go. And don't believe the stories about, oh, the Moors who went to Argentina, they're still Afrikaners. No, I think Joaquin Dutoy is not an Afrikaner because he speaks as much Afrikaans as I do. En ek praat nie Afrikaans nie. Maar ek verstaan. Anyway, so that's a little about the refugee program that I think should dispel a few rumors. Again, if you're interested in the program and you want to go and that's why you're here, thank you for coming. But I would ask you this. I work really hard to bring objective analysis to folks. If you do go to America, I ask you don't forget me. I mean, I like to have an audience, you know. This was a side thing. I didn't do it as a career. That's not my intent. But a lot of people count on my news, and it's a lot more interesting news when I have 800 or 1,000 or 2,000, 3,000 people watching news instead of just the 50 OGs, the original gangsters that hang out there from the beginning that have guilted me into keeping it going despite the shadow banning and the harassment from social media. Anyway, all right, so there's that. Now what the media want to hear about, your questions about the refugee program. All right, let me entertain them. I can't move around. I'm anchored because of the speakers now, so I may need some help for identifying hands. If you have a question, please, right here, sir.